July 1st. 1452 B.C. Aaron, the Jewish high priest, died on the first day of the month Ab, at the age of 123. 1190. The Crusaders under Richard Plantagenet and Philip de Valois, amounting to 100,000 warriors and pilgrims, assembled in the plains of Vézelay. 1270. Louis IX of France sailed from Aigues-Mortes, on his fatal crusade against the infidels of Tunis. 1413. Pierre des Essarts, a French nobleman, executed. He served in the Scottish army against England, 1402, and was taken prisoner. On his return to France he became a statesman, but was suspected of some political heresies, which forfeited his life. 1450. Jack Cade took possession of Southwark, and 2 days after entered London, cutting the ropes of the drawbridge with his sword. 1520. Cortés secretly evacuated the city of Mexico with the remains of his army. The Spaniards commenced their retreat a little before midnight, which was soon discovered by the Mexicans, who assailed them on all sides, so that it was with the utmost hazard of entire destruction that they effected their escape, with the loss of 600 Spaniards and 4,000 allies. All their artillery, all the riches they had amassed, the manuscripts of Cortés, were lost. Together with 40 horses, most of their prisoners, and the men and women in the service of the Spaniards, were killed. It was one of the most horrible and disastrous scenes on record, and acquired the name among the Spaniards of the Noche Triste. 1555. John Bradford, an English martyr in the reign of Queen Mary, and an eloquent preacher, burned at Smithfield for heresy. 1582. James Crichton the Admirable assassinated at Mantua. He was a native of Scotland, and altogether a most extraordinary character, about whom authors differ. Also most extraordinarily, some even treating his existence as fabulous. Urquhart places his death on the 27th February, at the Carnival. 1614. Isaac Casaubon, a celebrated Swiss critic and theologian, died at London. Nearly all the ancient classics are indebted to his valuable researches. 1626. Chaplains first appointed to each ship in the British Navy. 1627. King Charles I of England dismissed his Queen's French servants, which occasioned a war with France. 1643. The Great Assembly of Divines met at Westminster in the Jerusalem Chamber. 118 preachers and 26 laymen. 1676. New Jersey divided into East and West Jersey. The former granted to George Carteret, the latter to William Penn and others. 1681. Oliver Plunkett, Primate of Ireland, executed at Tyburn. It was afterwards discovered that he was guiltless of the crimes imputed to him, and that he fell a sacrifice to the intrigues of some of his priesthood. 1690. Battle of the Boyne, in Ireland, which decided the fate of James II in the Stuart dynasty, and established William III on the British throne. The Duke of Schomberg, one of the ablest generals of the time, was killed, at the age of 82. Also the Irish rector, George Walker, famous for his heroism. The forces of James were but 27,000, opposed to 36,000 strong. 1709. Edward Leigh died, a celebrated antiquary and linguist, and keeper of the Amalian Museum. 1731. John Montgomery, governor of New York, died. He possessed a kind and human disposition, and his death was much lamented. 1743. Action between the British ship Centurion, 60 guns, 400 men, Anson, and Spanish ship Acapulco, 64 guns, 550 men, $1.5 million on board. Spanish lost 67 killed, 84 wounded. British lost 2 killed, 17 wounded. See June 15, 1744. 1762. John Baptiste Nolan, a French geographer, died at Paris. 1766. John Francis Lefebvre de la Barre, a young French nobleman, executed. A wooden crucifix had been defaced on a public bridge, at which the Bishop of Amiens was greatly enraged, and demanded the disclosure of the perpetrators. Le Barre was arraigned on the false accusation of his enemy, Duval de Saucourt, and the indictment also charged him with having passed a procession of monks without taking off his hat. He was sentenced to have his tongue cut out, his right hand cut off, and to be burnt alive. The sentence the Parliament of Paris commuted, by a small majority, into decapitation before burning. Le Barre was scarcely 19 years old, and was one of the latest victims of that religious fanaticism in France which led to the Revolution. Voltaire exerted himself as warmly against this infamous act as he had against the execution of Calas. 1780. Action off Cape Finisterre between British ship Romney, 50 guns, and French frigate Artois, 40 guns, 460 men. 40 wounded. British 2 wounded. 1780. John Bell, a celebrated Scottish traveller, died, aged 91. He commenced his travels about the year 1714, in the employ of Peter the Great of Russia, with whom he was on terms of great intimacy, and extended his travels into many different countries, was afterwards for several years a merchant at Constantinople, and finally in 1747 returned to his native country to spend the remainder of his life in ease and affluence on his estates of Antirmone. 1781. Battle of Porto Novo, in Hindostan. 7,000 British under Sir A. Coote defeated Hyder Ali and 150,000 men. English loss about 400 killed and wounded. Hyder lost many of his best officers and 4,000 killed. 1782. The Marquess of Rockingham, First Lord of the English Treasury, died. His merit was his patriotism, and his patronizing such men as Burke, and bringing them into influence. 1798. Alexandria, in Egypt, taken by the French under Bonaparte, who issued a proclamation stating that he venerated God, the Prophet, and the Quran, and more than the Mamelukes did. 1800. Jean-Claude d'Arcon, a French general and engineer, died. He invented the floating batteries, which were intended to reduce Gibraltar. 1810. Louis Bonaparte abdicated the throne of Holland, and retired to Austria as a private individual. 1814. Paris-Gaulle surprised by the United States troops under Lieutenant Gregory. 1818. Thomas Bernard, founder of the British Gallery, died. He was eminent as a philanthropist. 1820. Toll first demanded and received on the Erie Canal. 1832. Right of suttee abolished in Hindostan by the British authorities. 1835. James Gibbon, the hero of Stony Point, died at Richmond, where for several years he had been collector of customs. 1839. Mahmud II, Sultan of Turkey, died in the 54th year of his age and 31st of his reign. 1839. About 150 Chippewa Indians treacherously massacred at the Falls of St. Anthony, and 20 on the St. Croix, by the Sioux, who had invited the Chippewas to meet for the purpose of forming a treaty of peace. About 50 of the Sioux were killed. 1850. Sergeant S. Prentice, a distinguished American lawyer, died, aged 40. 1853. Arthur Livermore, a New Hampshire jurist, died at Campden, New Hampshire, age 87. 1854. Waldo J. Burnett died at Boston, aged 25, a distinguished physician and naturalist, and author of several tracts on medical subjects. 1855. There was a second Sunday demonstration in Hyde Park, London, by a large and excited mob, against Sir Robert Grosvenor's Sunday Bill. 1856. A heavy gale on the coast of Labrador, when of a fleet of 30 vessels, 29 were driven on shore and lost.